and other proscribed items in Iraq. And he went on to say, may I add that in my last report, I commented on information provided by Iraq on a number of unresolved issues. Since that last report, which was the 7th of March, quotes, Iraq has sent several more letters on such issues. But he goes on, our experts have so far found that in substance, these letters contain only new information that will help, only limited new information that will help to resolve remaining questions. And those of you who are familiar with the reports and Security Council resolutions contained here and republished by me to the British House of Commons will know that in report after report after report by UNRWA, there is laid bare there all the unresolved disarmament issues and chapter and verse about how Saddam has failed to meet his disarmament obligations. And the result of that is that since we are absolutely clear that Saddam Hussein took a long time ago and has continued with it a strategic decision to defy the international community in accordance with Resolution 1441 and its 13th operative paragraph, we've been left with no option but to use force. A preliminary attack on command and control facilities was launched in the early hours of this morning, and my colleague, the Defence Secretary Geoff Hoon, will be making a statement in the House of Commons about this very shortly. Now, some members of the Security Council at yesterday's meeting continue to argue that we should disarm Iraq by maintaining the leisurely pace of the work programme laid down under a previous resolution passed in 1999, Resolution 1284. Let's be clear about 1284. 1284 was a British initiative. It took months to negotiate. In the course of those negotiations, in order to try and reach a consensus, we had to water down the powers of the inspectors. We finally got support, but 3 key members of the Security Council, France, China and Russia, refused to support 1284. And 1284 failed. It was seeking disarmament by exhortation of Saddam. He refused even to allow the inspectors into Iraq, still less to do their work. 1441 was there to replace 1284. 1441 backs inspections with a credible threat of force. And everybody in the Security Council signed up for 1441. When they were signing up for 1441, they were not saying this is disarmament by peace, as is now suggested. What they were saying is that to Saddam, either you disarm peacefully, or you have to accept that the international community will disarm you by force. It was never the case that 1441 implied the automatic use of force, and neither have we ever suggested it. But it is the case that 1441 required that force should be used conditionally if Saddam Hussein failed to comply by peaceful means. And he has now triggered those conditions. Now, at this time of the beginning of conflict, I want to say this in terms of our message to the people of Iraq. Our message to the people of Iraq is that we are with you. We support you in your plain wish to rid yourselves of the terrible leadership of Saddam Hussein, which has terrorized the Iraqi people for the past 2 decades. And we want to see your suffering come to an end. Earlier this week, we published a paper called A Vision for Iraq and the Iraqi People, and this commits us to working for the relief and reconstruction of Iraq after Saddam. We'll be discussing these issues with our partners at the European Council, the summit meeting in Brussels tonight and tomorrow. The Prime Minister, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and I will be going to Brussels. Part of the agenda of the Brussels summit represents important internal work for the European Union, particularly taking forward the Lisbon agenda of economic reform. But of course the summit will also be dominated by Iraq. And what we shall be arguing for is for the European community to come together and recognise that we have a common agenda working for the humanitarian relief of Iraq and its reconstruction. Towards that, our own Department for International Development has committed 20 million to immediate preparations for humanitarian relief and has earmarked a further 60 million for humanitarian operations. United Kingdom forces themselves will have £30 million for humanitarian purposes available to them to use in the first month. It's a mark of the appalling record of Saddam Hussein that Iraq is a prosperous country which has been reduced to penury, not least by the huge sums wasted on wars and on the development of weapons of mass destruction. And it's a measure of Saddam's indifference to human suffering that more than half the population in rural areas do not have access to safe drinking water, and that more Iraqi children die before reaching the age of 5 than in a number of impoverished sub-Saharan countries. And all this whilst more than $2 billion of oil for food programme funds remains untapped but available by the Iraqi regime. Our pledge is to work with the international community to meet the humanitarian needs of the Iraqi people and to support an international reconstruction programme. And to this end, as the conclusions of the Azores Summit committed us, we shall be working very hard to secure a new United Nations Security Council resolution. Thank you very much. Andrew Marr.
Foreign Secretary, two quick ones if I might. You described the overnight attacks as a limited attack on command and control facilities. Can you confirm that it was also an attempt to kill Saddam? And can you give us your assessment of his subsequent broadcast? Do we think it was him, and therefore has that failed in its an objective? And secondly, can you help us by giving us a little bit more information about the telephone call from your close friend Dominique that we read about in the newspapers?
So far as the first, you'll forgive me, but Jeff Hoon is the Defence Secretary. He'll be giving information about the military activities overnight. So far as the conversation with my genuinely good friend Dominique de Villepin is concerned, it is obvious that there is a difference of opinion on this question, and that is, it wasn't there, the difference of opinion was not there in the run-up to 1441, which was passed on the 8th of November. It has been there this year. I received Minister Villepin's message, which he asked me to pass on to British Prime Minister Blair, which I duly did, but I said that we did not accept the burden of it, and I also had to say to him that the problem for us was that we made a judgment, which I think is supported increasingly by the evidence, that sometime either late last year or earlier this year, France had taken a strategic decision not to implement Resolution 1441. And as far as we were concerned, that's the mother and father of the problems.
Our relations pretty bad at the moment.
Personal relations are, I think, very good, and I look forward to seeing Dominique in Brussels later on today. I think we'll get through this period. Now, yes, at the back. James Robbins.
James Robbins from the BBC. Foreign Secretary, given the scale of newly expressed international opposition to this war, how confident can you be of getting the authorisations you vitally need from the Security Council to legitimise aspects of military occupation of Iraq, particularly the process leading to the transfer to an interim civilian administration eventually, and also, crucially, of course, to get access to the oil for food programme in the absence of an Iraqi government once military occupation is in place? How confident can you really be of getting the Security Council behind you, as you must? Are you as confident as you were of getting a second resolution, or slightly less confident?
If you read the transcripts of the comments that were made yesterday in the Security Council, it's very clear that, regardless of their opinions on the use of military force against Iraq, there is a widespread understanding in the international community and in the Security Council about the humanitarian and reconstruction needs which are there already as a result of Saddam's impoverishment and will be still more necessary once Saddam has been removed.